The second running of the UTEC Classic was heavily promoted using the involvement of MVP athlete. It is a basic courtesy. If you advertise an event saying that a star is expected to be there, then in the event the star is unable to be there, then an apology should be forthcoming. Imagine for a second an entertainment show being advertised to highlight Beanie Man. He fails to show, and then the promoters give a lame excuse why he wasn't able to perform. Well, all will happen. The promoter will lose credibility, and the patrons will lose faith. That too can happen to our athletes, and I therefore urge organizations to invest more time in managing our national treasures. Far too much time is focused on performance, though an important component, but too little time is spent on impact, which goes a far further way. From that blog that was placed, the responses were coming in fast and furious, and a lot of people said that they will never attend another UTEC meet again. Also, there are people who are claiming that, as far as they are concerned, Asafa Powell is dead to them. Now, this is the country of his birth, and this is where he lives, this is where he trains. And the image, the impact to his image, we don't know what it is. We don't even know if it's going to be impacted any at all. But what we do know is that a lot of people are upset with MVP, and by extension, they're upset with Asafa Powell. In this instance, maybe undeservedly so, because I don't think he had anything much to do with it. I think the way the whole situation was handled made it very difficult for him, which may hurt his image. We don't know yet. It's too early to tell, but if he goes to the World Championships and wins a gold medal, maybe all will be forgotten. But given the circumstances under which this thing is happening, the potential is there for him to suffer, a significant blow to his image in this regard. So on the line, we have somebody who's going to tell us what he can do to help to rescue his reputation, if it is indeed damaged from this recent incident. And her name is Marie Berbick Graham, and she's a communications specialist and freelance journalist. She's also the founder and editor of Statcom newsletter for communications and masscommagazine.com. And she's the CEO of Berbick Graham and Associates, a communication and development consultancy that is based here in Kingston. And she's going to hopefully help us to throw some light on the situation. Good evening, Marie.
Hi, good evening, Leighton. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for appearing on my show for the first time, and hopefully the first of many more times.
I hope so too.
All right. You are okay with what happened on the weekend to a certain degree, and we don't have all the information that we need to have to be able to discuss this matter in a way that would be more useful, having all the information as opposed to guessing in what we're going to do in some instances here, or assuming certain things. What is your initial take on what happened on the weekend? I mean, in broad terms, what is your take on what happened on the weekend? Could it have been handled better?
I really do believe it could have been handled better. But what happened on the weekend for me, having been watching Asafa for quite some time now, and I've written about him in terms of him as a brand and how he can actually try to repair his image, because I think that his image has already been damaged. And the reason I say this is because what happened on the weekend is one of many incidents that I think could have been avoided or could have been better handled. And I think his management team needs to start thinking a lot more seriously about the PR aspect of Asafa Powell's career. I think they've done a fantastic job in terms of the technical part of it, the performance. We've all seen that. Stephen Francis has done a great job. The business side of it, I think a lot is left to be desired in terms of how they manage his image.
Mm-hmm.
Asafa, I think, is just still very innocent. He is aware that he's a world-class athlete, but at the same time, I don't think he's aware of how strong a brand he is. And I think that is a sad thing, because these athletes, they have a legion of fans out there, and it's not just about what you do on the track, it's also about what you do off the track.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to know what people are thinking about Asafa, you just need to go onto YouTube or one of the social media networks and see the comments people are making. I'm not sure if he's been following them up, but I think it's important that at this stage of his career he does. He's no longer the fastest man in the world. I know that Asafa is training very hard and trying to regain that title, but this is one of many incidents that I think could have been better handled. You don't call a press conference to tell people nothing.
Absolutely.
You know, you call a press conference because you have news that you wish to announce. For them to say the real reason is not going to be revealed either by, and let me say this is Stephen Francis' words I've seen in the papers, by himself or by Powell. And I think it's very, very damaging. And even if we don't see it now, it is going to manifest later. So I think they need to take stock and really start to treat this young man's career as a very, very important thing in terms of how they manage his image. Yeah,
because one of the things that I've noticed based on the comments I've been getting from people and what I've seen on my Facebook page, for example, is that there's a lot of carryover from last year when MVP, for want of a better term, boycotted the Jamaica Invitational, where they said that because of their scheduling they weren't going to participate at that meet. There are people in the know who thought there were other reasons why the MVP camp wasn't participating there, and there was a certain amount of tarnishing of the image of the entire camp because people felt that because perhaps it was a money issue or whatever. People were speculating, and there is still some anger because when you look at some of the comments today, for example, you see where some of those comments are coming back from last year, where people are saying, you know, it's the same thing over again from last year, and it's carrying over. That carryover effect can eventually develop into like a snowball effect right down a hill, where it only mushrooms and becomes a monster and takes on a life of its own, where he can't possibly repair his image because people have this perception of him locally. There is also the perception again that they're only doing this thing for the money and not because of any social investment in Jamaica, or vice versa, where they're thinking that people here are against them, or, you know, I don't know, I don't understand the thinking in that campaign at all because they don't really tell people much. But what can he do from here on to improve his outlook and the image that is currently in existence with this, especially after this latest incident?
As it relates to Asafa, I think that there are several questions that he needs to ask himself, or his management team needs to ask themselves at this point. And the first question is, how do the fans currently see Asafa? Because Asafa doesn't create an image, you know. It's the things that he does. People put one and one together or two and two together, and they decide for themselves who Asafa is based on what they read, what they see him do, what he says. Mm-hmm. So he needs to firstly look at how the fans are seeing him, and secondly, he needs to look at how he wants to be seen by the fans, which is really the wish image. The third thing he needs to do is ask himself, are my actions in sync with how I wish to be seen? And if not, what do I need to change about the way I do things now in order to achieve that wish image? And the sad thing about this is, if he asks himself those questions, and having asked himself number 4, he decides that it's not really important, then we have a real problem here. Because apparently it will become clear to everybody that they don't understand how important the PR aspect of this whole thing is. Mm-hmm. It's not just about you as an athlete going out on the field and doing well and being regarded as one of the best in the world. Look at David Beckham, for example. You look at Beckham now, you would think, based on what you've read about him over the years, what you've seen of him, that he's the best footballer who ever lived. And between you and I and everybody else who know anything about football, that's not true.
Not even close.
You understand what I'm saying? So this is a man who takes his career very seriously, not just looking at the financial part of it, but he's looking at himself as a brand.
Yeah, and he's a major brand.
Yes, I think that our athletes need to take that kind of approach as well, because they are brands, you know. Once you reach that level, and they need to understand the value of the brand and what people are associating with them and the damage that it can do when they act foolishly. And I think that the MVP club has done a very good job in terms of Jamaica on the world stage again as a sprinting power. But they also need to understand that their power goes beyond what happens on the field and what they do on the field. So I would advise Bruce. I think Bruce is a very nice guy. I haven't met him personally, but from what I've seen of him, I think they really need to sit down and look at it carefully and look at it seriously.
Yeah, clearly, because when you look at the fact that Jamaica is currently blessed with the 2 fastest men that have ever lived. And the BBC came down here the last few weeks leading up to champs, and they were here. And every single story that has been generated out of Jamaica, every single one has focused exclusively on Usain Bolt. I mean, notwithstanding that Asafa Powell there, the man whose world record Usain Bolt broke. And there is not, I have not seen, because I read the websites already, I have not seen a story generated on what Asafa Powell is doing. One story I saw when he came out, when he was in Australia, where they were talking about he fixed Usain's car, or works on Usain's car engine. So even in mentioning him, there's a direct association to Usain Bolt. That's the point of reference that they're using now. So he needs to do something to get himself back into a position where he's seen as a real champion of the sport that he represents.
Let me just make one point here, Leighton. You're quite right. And what I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, the best product doesn't always occupy prime shelf space. Not if the pitch isn't resonating with the target market. Asafa is a fantastic athlete. I mean, we are not even debating that. But the fact is, what is he using to market himself now? How has he positioned himself? He's no longer the fastest man in the world. He's not an Olympic 100 meters champion. He's been eclipsed and overshadowed by Usain Bolt. Until he can regain that fastest man in the world title, or if he can get, something, that medal that we all want to see him get at the World Championship, then he's going to seriously have to look at how he's going to market brand Asafa. He has to move beyond that former 100-meter world record holder label as his main selling point and redefine himself. And this is where the fans come in. The fans are very important. You can't just tell the fans that, hey, I'm going to be at a meet on the weekend, and they come out to see you and cheer you on. People love Asafa, I'm one of those people who really love Asafa, and I want to see him do well. But the fact is, if the fans are cheering you on and rooting for you and you're disappointing the fans, then you're heading down the wrong road. Yeah,
because eventually they're gonna reach a point where you do something that becomes a straw that breaks the camel's back. Because just to add to your point, over the last few months we're doing some focus groups with some kids across the island about some work that we're planning to put together. And we did about 15 groups of kids, about 20 kids per group, sorry. And among the questions we asked them was who was their favorite between Usain and Asafa Powell. And almost 90% of the kids favored Asafa. Right? So there is still a lot of love for him out there, but it's only a matter of time if these blunders keep happening before that changes. And you mentioned, you wrote a wonderful piece in your magazine in January where you mentioned some of the blunders that he has made. You want to talk about a little bit about them and what could he have done differently with regards to those mistakes?
Okay, I think it's quite clear to everybody now, Leighton, that Asafa needs to be very careful about what he says to the media. He needs to be managed. If he's not the type of guy who wants somebody to be there with him every time he's talking to a media person, that's not possible anyway, but I don't think that a little media relations training is going to hurt. I think they should look at it if he has not yet done it. And I also think that they need to put people in place who will represent Asafa in terms of speaking for him. You know what I mean? You can't have just about anybody going out there and saying something. And when I say this, I'm talking about his parents. As wonderful as they are, Asafa is a world-class athlete. He's at a level where you have to be careful what you say about him in the public domain, especially if you're family or if you're friends. And in the past, we've seen where, maybe not necessarily in these words, but his mom was not pleased about him dancing. And the media is going to sensationalize everything. And we all remember that headline in the Star, I don't want Asafa dancing, right. For example. One thing you have to look at, Asafa is not a child. And even though he has been brought up a certain way, for his mom to publicly say, I don't want Asafa dancing, she sort of reduces him as a man. So you don't have mommy going out there and saying things like this when you are an athlete at that level. And come on, we all know it. A lot of women go to these meetings and they love Asafa as an athlete because he's very fast, he's talented, but they love him for other reasons too.
Yes.
And you don't want mommy to go out there and make him look like a little boy, right?
Definitely not.
And there's another error that Asafa made in terms of what he says publicly. I know the pressure was on him at the Olympics, and we all know how that turned out. But at the World Championships 2007, when we saw that race, our hearts sank when he was overtaken by Tyson Gay. But whatever Asafa was thinking, I don't think he should have said at the time that he got scared when he felt gear run up on him. As a champion, at the time the man was on top of the world. You don't tell people that you get scared. Fans see you as some kind of superhero. You have to maintain that. You know, there must be another way that you can explain what happened with that race without saying, I got scared. Superheroes don't get scared. And the other thing that I was particularly concerned about, his father also made some statements about him not being ready for this level, or he's not that kind of man for the big leagues. And then he came and said the same thing. You can't confirm that kind of thing. You're Asafa Powell. What you're doing is giving the critics, you know, something more to throw at you, as if to confirm what they have already said, that you can't do it on the day when you're expected to do it. So made quite a few blunders in terms of his things pieces, and I think he really ought to be managed in this aspect. So they need to put somebody in place to help these guys out.
Yeah, because you mentioned the whole thing about media training, which is something that a lot of Jamaican athletes could use. The whole experience of branding yourself properly and positioning yourself to be able to maximize, because, you know, you have your sporting career is only so long, 10 years maximum for depending on the sport. You need to be able to maximize your earnings during that period of time. I remember speaking to Darvan Bailey recently, and Darvan Bailey was saying that after the first year, after he won the World Championship in 1995, he made a whole bunch of money the next year just by positioning himself in the right way. And then he came back in 96 and won the gold medal in Atlanta, which even further heightened his earning potential because of how he positioned himself. He always speaks, when he and I speak, because we're old schoolmates, and sometimes we're on Facebook and sometimes we talk on the phone. And he says that basically a lot of what is happening with Asafa, and even Usain Bolt, are things that should not be happening with them. So
that is correct, Leighton. I quite agree with you on that, because it was just recently, I think it was last week sometime, that we had this whole excitement about a statement Usain made about use of marijuana with Jamaican kids and so on. He's speaking off the cuff. They need to understand as well that you have to be careful what you say. You don't just speak off the cuff about drugs or things like that. You're an athlete, and this is a sore point in sports. These journalists, these overseas journalists, I think, many of the times I get the impression they're just looking for one little thing to blow it out of proportion.
Absolutely.
Where these athletes are concerned. So it's not that Usain is perfect. Personally, I think that he is more aware of himself as a brand than Asafa is at the moment. And I think that Usain is really a showman, and he has the whole package right now. You notice that Usain entertains when he's on the field.
Always
he has
entertaining.
his clothing line out now and all of that. And I think Asafa had a fitness video out at one point, didn't he?
I am vaguely thinking that there's something like that.
Right, so there is some realization that, you know, you're looking at a brand and a valuable brand, but right now the thinking, I think, more seriously, MVP needs to take this under control and really help these athletes to understand the power that they have at this time and really benefit from it.
Yes, instead of shooting themselves in the foot. Well, Marie Berbick Graham, thank you very much for your insight.
You're welcome, Leighton, anytime.
Yeah, man, thanks. We take a break and come right back. This is Sports Nation.